In my last video, I showed you some tips and techniques for the Pec Major, and in this one, we're diving a little bit deeper down into the Pec Minor. And if you were looking for something to help you dig a little bit deeper into those tissues, maybe try some homemade organic deep tissue body butter. I'll include the link in the description below. The Pec Minor is indeed buried beneath the Pec Major, so getting down into these deeper tissues involves softening the more superficial tissues. And in order to do that, I've got a whole video on how to work the Pec Major, but for a simple version, breath is going to be your best friend. Ask your client to take a deep breath in, have them exhale out a lot of that tension, push down into those deeper tissues, and allow the softening of that Pec Minor to begin. A quick side note, anytime you're working with any muscles that are attached to the rib cage, your client's breath is your favorite tool. So I've had my client slide to the edge of the table because I can't very well ask him to extend his arm down into the table. So the edge of the table allows me to extend or horizontally abduct his arm back into a position that really opens up the chest. What I'm doing here is a simple pin and stretch. As I bring his arm up towards the ceiling, I'm softening the Pec Major. And then as I extend his arm back down, I'm sinking through the Pec Major as it's lengthening. And at the same time, I'm frictioning over the Pec Minor. So the Pec Minor runs superior to inferior. And with the Pec Major in this position, I can really friction over those fibers of the Pec Minor and start to break down a lot of that stuck tissue. A couple of side notes, you do not have to use a soft fist. You can switch it to a palm or even a forearm for this work, whatever feels appropriate for your client's needs. Make sure your client doesn't have anything pinching in the back of their shoulder. If they do, don't bring this work as far back. And if you have your client turn their head slightly away from the work that you're doing, this is going to connect all of the tissues through the neck and the shoulder into the pectoral region, which is going to make this work feel that much more effective. As I get a little more aggressive with my elbow into the Pec Minor, I want to point out that as the arm falls backwards, the scapula is falling medially, but that means that the front of the scapula, which is the coracoid process, which is an attachment site for the Pec Minor, starts to slide out laterally. So you're shifting the way that the Pec Minor sits as you sink down and cross over these tissues with your work. I really want to use this information to my advantage. So as I sink deeper and deeper into this tiny little muscle, I can rotate the arm out into external rotation or move the arm around, which is going to shift the way the scapula sits. As the scapula moves, the coracoid process moves, the Pec Minor moves, and our work becomes a lot more fluid and a lot more detailed. Finding ways to get into various points of every single fiber is going to give you the detail that both you and your clients are looking for. As I slide off this work and walk around to the other side of the table, I want to remind you about the importance of breath in relationship to the Pec Minor. Chronic breathing problems can cause a shortness in this muscle, and vice versa. A shortness in this muscle can make it hard to breathe. So remembering that this work is about how the scapula moves, how the ribs move, and how we can get deep into this tissue to allow more mobility is something you can explain to your clients if they're trying to understand why you're moving their arm through all time and space. From this angle, I was really easily able to access the lateral aspect of the Pec Minor, and by standing on the other side of the table, I've been able to access the medial surface. But now I want to get a little more into the insertion at the coracoid process. I've moved my client back towards the middle of the table, and I'm starting by supporting his shoulder with my right hand, and I'm using my left hand to free up the clavicle a little bit. Finding the coracoid process can be a lot like trying to find a stone that is buried among sticks and vines that have been rooting themselves for years. So in an attempt to clear away some of those vines, I'm using my right hand to shift the humerus up and down, which is going to move the entire shoulder girdle. So the scapula and the clavicle are both going to shift up as I push up. At the same time, I'm using my left hand to sink down into those tissues, find my way through the Pec Major, out to the end of the subclavius, and start to free up the coracoid process. What you find once you get down there is going to dictate what technique you use, but one of my favorites and one that is especially effective for the Pec Minor is an AET. So I'm going to take my time and really sink down into that muscle. I'm going to have my client engage it by reaching their fingertips down towards their toes. This is going to push the scapula and the shoulder down towards the rib cage. And the pec minor is primarily responsible for depression of the shoulder. So you'll feel this muscle fire immediately, and you can sink down against that contraction. Once your client relaxes this muscle, you can sink down even deeper and start to really affect that change. In case you missed what I just did, I'm repeating that same technique, but I'm using my thumb this time, and I'm using my other hand to support my thumb to make sure that I don't lose my thumbs. I can also support my work with my other thumb, however you feel comfortable and can mechanically take charge of your own structure. I support that work. At this point, the pec minor should be really soft and you can really feel a lot of that heat coming through with that new blood flow. Take a moment to address the fact that it doesn't just move with the coracoid process, it also moves with the rib cage. So take a few moments to manipulate this tissue and move the lower ribs, creating an accordion effect and pulling in that whole connection from the neck, through the shoulder, through the pecs, down through the ribs, all the way into the breath. I want to move back up to moving the shoulder though, because it's a lot easier to move than the rib cage, and there's a lot of great work we can do now that all of these tissues are soft. So I've started by really lengthening the pec major by pulling the shoulder up towards the ear, and I've just done a little more friction to ensure the actual freedom of this muscle if it is unnecessarily stuck to the rib cage. I can also use some trigger point therapy because trigger points really do love hiding in this muscle. Like a clownfish and a sea anemone, they will nestle in there and hang out for life if we let them. I can offer a twist to a pin and stretch by pinning down the upper portion of this muscle and then sliding the coracoid process down. I'm taking the attachment sites and just softening them as I'm allowing the length of the muscle to stay there. And for my last trick, it's harder to tell, but I'm sinking a little bit closer towards the coracoid process, and I'm creating a little bit of a vibration with my left hand into the attachment and with my right hand moving the structures. And with all of these, pull some traction down through the arm and into the hand at the end. Allow some space in the neck and the shoulder, and allow that breath to enjoy some of its newfound freedom. My goal with these videos is to get more therapists like you out there and feeling confident and doing the work that more people need. If you like this video and you like the work that I'm doing, please consider supporting me on Patreon, and definitely please leave some comments below if you've got some extra tips and tricks of your own. Thanks for watching.